webinar on driving Agile IT with automation for hybrid cloud. As most of you would be familiar with the big move towards cloud, primarily driven by situations like COVID, but with the increased adoption of cloud comes additional complexities with respect to managing hybrid cloud, whether it is an on-premise environment or a cloud environment, a public cloud environment, or just a multi-cloud environment. And as you can see, I'm sitting at the beach, or at least I wish I was sitting at the beach. And a lot of things with respect to managing a hybrid cloud platform comes with automation. So if you want to be looking at how do you drive an agile IT that can actually respond quickly to your business users, while at the same time automating it so that you can actually have both productivity as well as improvement with respect to governance, it's really important to look at automation. So with that, we actually have Li Ming, who's got from Red Hat, who's actually got more than 20 years of experience in open source. He's a guru in automation. He's a guru in cloud native development with containers. And what he'll be doing with us later is he will be sharing with us on how you can actually take advantage of automation to drive a very agile IT process and system for adoption on a hybrid cloud platform. So before we get started, a few ground rules. If you have questions throughout the sessions, please put it into your Q&A. There's a button at the bottom edge of the Zoom screen, Q&A. You can put in your questions there, and at the end of the session, we will actually take questions together with Li Ming. On the second thing is that at the end of the session, there's actually a survey form. We would appreciate if you could give us feedback so that the SES team would be able to tailor the next chapter or make improvements on our webinar series. So with that, maybe before we start, let me hand over the call to Dr. Anton, the chairman of the SES Cloud chapter. Dr. Anton?
Thank you, Guna. A very warm welcome to everyone. Good afternoon. I have a few words, a few sentences only to say before I pass on to Li Ming to take you through this webinar. First of all, let me thank Guna, who is the GM of Red Hat, for supporting this event today. Let me also thank Li Ming for taking time to conduct this session. Also, let me thank Camilla and Joanna, Camilla from SES and Joanna from Red Hat for organizing this event. We understand there are nearly 100 plus registrations. That's a good turnout for today's event. I just have a couple of slides to share with you all about the chapter. So let me go through these few slides and I will pass it back to Li Ming at the end of next couple of minutes, the most. Okay, the first thing to share is the chapter Expo. Cloud chapter was formed about 7 years back, if my memory serves me right. Before that, we existed as an interest group. So it's one of the biggest and fastest growing chapters within Singapore Computer Society. You see the pictures of the active Expo members who have been tremendous value to the chapter and to the society in terms of creating awareness and transferring know-how to the industry. Events such as this is one of the main things that we do with a view to transfer skills and know-how and create greater awareness about cloud computing. These are the co-opted members of the Expo. Couple of slides only, more to go. Just to share with you what has transpired in 2020. We used to conduct these sessions at the National Library Board in the evenings, every other month pretty much. Because of COVID, like everybody else, we have gone virtual. And since April, we have gone through 5 or 6 sessions. As you can see on the slide, there was one on 23rd April, which was about responding to cloud by leveraging, responding to COVID by leveraging from cloud. Then again, on the 4th of August, vision analytics in the cloud. On the 15th, we had an event in partnership with Singapore Manufacturing Federation about digital transformation for manufacturing in the cloud. On the 11th, which was about AI in the cloud, and on the 22nd of December, another session on leveraging cloud. Today's session, I will pass it to Liming to speak about driving Agile IT with automation for hybrid cloud. So one last slide. The cloud chapter on an annual basis organizes a flagship conference. Because of COVID, we couldn't do it last year. Now we are back again at it, and it's scheduled for 18th of March. It's going to be a hybrid event or a blended event. That is, we will have a physical plus virtual. Fortunately, or it's good that MOS Kiat Hao has agreed to be the guest of honor, and I hope that most of you will take time to attend this. The highlights of the event or the conference is about innovation in the cloud. And also, as we all know, the cloud is a business model that encompasses or encapsulates everything that is big data, AI, IoT, amongst others. So the conference will have different sessions on all of these technologies. On that note, let me not labor on. Let me pass it to Liming to take you all through for the rest of the session. Thanks again to Red Hat, and thank you all for attending this session. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen, Una? All good? All right, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Right, and very much thank you to SCS for inviting me, to have this session with the audience to really talk about, automation. Right, I hope everyone has taken a good break over the holidays, right, and totally recharged for 2021. I hope everyone is, well and safe. All right, so 2021 has been a unique year because of COVID-19. Right, COVID-19 has impacted significantly in many ways. Right, businesses are affected, our economy is affected. And in fact, if you look at the MTI forecast that was released a couple of weeks or months ago, right, it forecasted like a -6% for Singapore GDP growth for 2021, right? And people's livelihood and health are definitely impacted. But COVID-19 is not the first, and certainly will not be the last, right? And if you look at the couple of years, from early 2021 to right now, there was the 2001 dot-com bust, there was the 2003 SARS, and in fact, there's a 2007 financial crisis due to the the US housing bubble burst. And COVID-19 has shown us that we need to embrace the change. My name is Liming from Red Hat Singapore, right? I'm a senior solution architect focusing on cloud, automation, and container technologies. In today's session, I'm going to walk you through and really discuss about, in today's volatile and turbulent market, Agile IT is a necessity. And with the right technologies like automation will really help businesses, embrace the hybrid cloud. At the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A, right? So from the Zoom window, there's a bottom right-hand corner. Do feel to put in your questions, and we will address at the end of the presentation, right? Let's get started. Right, we have all seen what COVID-19 has done, right? The disruptions has made a significant impact to every businesses, regardless of which vertical you are in, right? If you look at the airlines, they're all being parked dormant in Alice Springs, Australia, empty hotel rooms around the world, and shuttered businesses around the globe. However, right, disruptions like COVID-19 is yet another disruption that we will face time and time again. Disruptions will always challenge the old paradigm, right? Remember the old Kodak story, how digital disruptors like Airbnb, Uber and Grab, or even the new digital banking license that we have launched, last year, will challenge existing businesses practices, or even, the ability to react to changes. We have seen the meme that was floating around last year, the meme that, what is driving your digital transformation? Was it your CIO? Was it your CEO? It was the COVID-19, right? COVID-19 essentially pushed us forward in terms of digital transformation. Right, the world, as what we have known, right, since last year, from what has happened in November last year in Wuhan, the world has changed overnight. right? In fact, we have gone from working from home. Sorry, we have gone from face-to-face meetings, the typical social norms, having access to your work calendar. This has totally changed overnight, and it changed the way we live, we work, and we play. Right when the pandemic lockdown happened in early May, March circuit breaker, we observed that many organizations were facing challenges enterprise-wide. Well, and while COVID-19 is raging globally, what are the impacts of COVID-19 to the organizations, and what are the challenges that they face today and tomorrow and to the future? Right, circuit breaker, it was not too long ago, right? It was a dramatic change to how we conduct our businesses. There was a new social norm. Home-based learning was, in fact, for the parents like myself, we were all scrambling to grab laptops, even monitors that coming off the shelf of Harvey Norman, Challenger, or any place that you couldn't basically just grab any laptops and monitors from these shops, right? And issues with LMS from the day one of home-based learning, and that was the problem, right? And when I talked to one of my customers before, right, when circuit breaker was in fact, he joked to me about his BCP plans, right? He was so confident that their BC plans were for their businesses, right? They had all the processes in place, and they have all the multiple redundancies that they have on the systems. They had multiple data centers. They're also embracing having the systems on the cloud. But when COVID-19 hits, they were essentially not doing BCP for the systems, right? They were doing BCP for the staff. They were team A, they were team B. They were essentially not prepared. They were scrambling to react to the changes that they need to do. To bring home desktops and monitors because they don't have the laptop set up, they don't have the VDI or the remote access all being set up. Lines of communication were slow, right? Because we were all not just used to working remotely from home. Everybody was essentially working remotely from home, right? It's very hard to communicate. Right? In fact, such situations are very common across all the businesses, especially from last year onwards. Right? There is a dramatic shift in consumer patterns and how we conducted businesses. Number one, BCP for ops were executed. Right? There was a sudden demand for VDI and remote access because all of a sudden we're all working from home. We need to have access to our systems in the office. IT ops will still have to do day two manageability on the systems, and they're all being stretched in the end. Right? Business have to scale to quickly react to the demand. Application modernizations projects work, they have to all be prioritized and sped up to be container ready and cloud native because essentially they had to scale, right? Because everybody is consuming all those digital services immediately, right? At a sudden surge, and they had to reprioritize some of the projects, right, to be more cloud native, right? Embracing public cloud, and that's needed because of necessity, right? They had to do things like rapid assessment, right, to look at what can be moved to the cloud because of the existing IT infrastructure problem. They're all being limited to what they have on premise, and the natural progression is really to move to the cloud, right? Because the cloud essentially has all the elasticity that you want. You can burst to the cloud, you can scale on the cloud. It gives you the ability to consume a lot of compute resources. In fact, the ability to consume compute resources, we actually ran out of instances around the world, right? If you look at some of the reports that's coming in from AWS, email were essentially running out of instances, and you couldn't spin up any instances on the email region itself. But what about security, right? What about compliance, right? Because a lot of times, while you react to meet the business demand, you had to scale, right? But how do you actually start to begin to manage, and secure all these instances in a system, and be it whether it's on premise or whether it's on the cloud. And last but not least, it was really about agility, right? Agility was crucial in the organization, regardless of where the role that you're playing in, whether it's in the business, whether you are a tech guy, whether it's you are HR, ops, legal, compliance. You need to be more agile to really react to the changes that was happening right during the COVID-19 pandemic. Right, and COVID-19 has shown us that we need to be better prepared for disruptions. To be more agile in terms of our decision-making process or even our IT infrastructure, right? People are all moving to the cloud because cloud elasticity. You can actually provision a lot of compute resources on the cloud today. And in fact, there is a Chinese idiom, that's saying, I read this from Straits Times, I think that was last night, right? Somebody from a SME, right? He mentioned that a crisis is an opportunity or a chance for a turning point, right? In fact, if you look at it, many businesses today, they all have pivoted, right, or began to embrace cloud technologies due to the increase in digital consumptions, right? Such rapid consumptions resulted, like I said earlier, in certain regions running out of compute resources. Yes, we need to be able to quickly react to changes, but how do we support such a transformation while being still so siloed and still using traditional tools and technology? And that's where I'm going to talk about, automation later on to really support our hybrid cloud journey. But at the end of the day, how can we make elephants fly, right? That's where Agile IT comes in, right? It empowers you to be more flexible, optimizing your operations, and really allowing you to innovate on your product because of the processes that you have in place, right, today to really move that technology much faster. And now, let's take a quick look of what do we mean by Agile IT or Agile organizations, right? Agile organizations function very differently from traditional organization. Instead of like a top-down approach or even siloed departments, you now have such a thing called an Agile cell, right? An Agile cell is essentially made of cross-functional team members that are driven by an outcome. They're all very focused on the delivery of the end result, which in this case could be a new product or could be a new initiative of the company, right? Within itself, there are active collaborations, right, with people, right, that are very focused on the results. And there's in fact a servant leader, right, that promotes a collaborative approach within the cell itself, and of course across the organization, right? Each cell has the knowledge, right, and skills within the team and should have the mission, right, representing the end-to-end delivery. And that's where we talk about, Agile and DevOps and how you can scale, horizontally. But if you look at the elements of an Agile organization, we frequently see these four things, right? You talk about the structure, you talk about the people, you talk about the process, and of course, lastly, the technology, right? And structure is essentially what I talked about in the earlier slides. It's about a Agile cell, right? Instead of a top-down approach, you have a group of empowered, individuals within the cell with a servant leadership. It is definitely not a hierarchical leadership that is, traditionally top-down, right? And with a well-defined, flat kind of structure that scales horizontally, and that's what you want in an Agile organization because you want to be, you want to have the ability to scale. And the COP, which is the community of practice, is going to be very important. A community of practice, or sometimes people call it the discipline of practice, right? It's really to be able to spread the know-how, whether is it the process or whether is it the technology, right? And essentially to help the team to succeed and scale even further, right? Number two, people. They need to have the right mindset. Right? It's most likely going to be, like what we always say, it's going to be a culture shift, right? And really creating the right culture capable of facilitating this change, right? And organizations do spend a lot of time on this because people are essentially our most important assets. Third, process, right? This is essentially about DevOps. It's really about agility, right? To be able to experiment more, to be not afraid to fail. We want to fail fast, but at the same time, learn fast. And that's the experimentation culture that we want to encourage, and that an organization should cultivate itself. Last but not least is really about technology, right? Technology is the key enabler of an Agile IT, of an Agile organization. We have systems that range from existing from mainframes all the way to x86 or to the latest cloud systems, right? You have the three cloud providers, cloud native systems, right? We need to be able to adapt to all of these Agile systems, right? That are cloud native to really allow us to innovate faster, take advantage of new cloud native development, right? To really spear ahead of to build newer and better products for our consumers, right? Because right now in this pandemic and moving forward, it's all going to be more and more digital consumption, right? But ultimately, you can have the right people, you can have the right process, but if you do not have the right technology, it's going to be still the same, right? Technology is a key enabler. Your IT infrastructure needs to be able to move faster. You need to be able to manage and look at the hybrid cloud, right? Otherwise, you're not going to move as fast as you would like because you simply don't have the infrastructure or the platform to to provide you the ability to be more agile, right? And let's really look at the technology, right? So these are some key three key technologies that when we talk about, especially in the agile IT or of an open hybrid cloud, right? There's this the cloud native development, right? What do we mean by that? Cloud native development is essentially looking at your existing applications, right? How do you take advantage of the latest and greatest, perhaps the more the different languages, newer frameworks, or even take advantage of cloud native database, right? To really ensure that your workload is portable, right, across multiple environments. And that's how you can actually burst and scale easily because you're no longer tied to the infrastructure. Next is really the hybrid cloud infrastructure, right? Where are you going to put your workload on? Is your workload still going to be run on virtual machines? Is it still going to run as a container? Right? Container, of course, being the preferred approach today because container essentially allows to give you workload portability, regardless whether you run it on premise or whether you run it in the cloud, because containers are a portable format, right? And that's where the last couple of 3, 4, 5 years, that's where the Kubernetes comes in, right? Kubernetes helps you to manage the infrastructure, helps you to manage the workload. But last but not least, it's really about manageability and the automation of capabilities of the organization. But when you look at manageability, how do you manage all the things that you have? Because as you try to innovate, you're going to start consuming more and more resources. You're going to consume more and more, perhaps virtual machines. You're going to burst the cloud. You're going to deploy Kubernetes. You're going to deploy your containers onto the cloud. How do you start to manage them? And how do you start to automate some of these managed processes? Because that's important. And that's really the highlight of the topic today. We're going to really focus a lot on how do we use a tool like an automation, right? An automation tool to really to manage your day 0, day 1, day 2 of your IT ops, right? As you start to embrace the hybrid cloud journey, right? And let's really go straight into automation for hybrid cloud. And if you look at the Gartner, right? So this is very recent. This is, I think, was published late last year, and Gartner actually called this the top strategic technology trend for 2021, right? Because of the pandemic, right? And inside this paper, it listed 3 main trends. If you look at the verticals, right? It's about people centricity, location independence, and resilience delivery, right? I'll go into some of the technologies later on, right? But if you look at people centricity, right? It's really because of how COVID-19 has changed the way we work and interact. It's very obvious, right? The social norm, the way we interact with each other, the way we do
Li Ming, you've gone on mute.
how did I go on mute? Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Yeah, so I was talking about the Gartner top strategic technology trends, right? So this is something that has been recently published by Gartner, and they look at how COVID-19, right, for 2020 will change the way we consume digital services, the way we look at things, right? And that's very obvious, right? Because if you look at the 3 key topics that they mentioned, right? People centricity, right? It's essentially how we work and how we interact. And that's very obvious, right? I mean, the way I work now, I'm always on Zoom, I'm always on Blue Jeans, I'm always on Google Meet, right? It's less face-to-face meeting. And the way I interact with my customers, my Jamboard, my digital whiteboard, it's very different, right? So how do we, easily enable consumption of digital tools for staff, right? For your businesses itself, right? Regardless of the role, whether you're in IT, whether you're in HR, whether you're in finance, how do you do all this digitally today? And of course, the changing consumer pattern. Consumer patterns, it's all have been gone, mostly online today. And next is really location independence, right? How do we enhance digital mobility? Right? And that's really all about it, right? Because everybody is far away from each other. Like you and I, we all, even though we're all in Singapore, we're all on Zoom today, right? How do we do this for our businesses, for our partners, and for our customers, right? What are the new technologies that we need to adopt, right? What is the new mode of operation? And ultimately, how do we, scale this better and manage this better, right? The last is really resilient delivery, right? We always talk about CI/CD, we always talk about DevOps, but in this volatile time, we are digital services consumption. It's so rapid. Things are being pushed out more frequently than since last time, right? How do we react quickly, right? At the same time, providing quality service for our consumers. You just look at the Trace Together app. For the last 6 to 9 months, how many updates were there? And the maskoware.sg, trace how to find your trace together token.sg, whatever.sg, right? All these rapid improvements, right? All these rapid deployments has been there, right? Because the way the world we are in right now, it's very different, right? And if you look at the initiatives, right, and they actually lay out 9 initiatives. I'm not going to cover all 9, right? But if you look at automation as the D foundation layer, right, because it is so important, and in fact they call it hyper automation, right? Because this allows an organization to really have the necessary means to react, right, to be more flexible, more willing to adapt new policies, right, instead of being resistant to change, or on a highly strained system, because you basically gain something new, right, using in tool like automation to allow you to be more agile, to really, someone said to me earlier, to summon the infrastructure at your fingertip, and that's really what is it all about, right? Because with that, right, like I said earlier, right, technology as a key enabler, right? Without that, you're not going to be able to react quickly, right? You're not going to provision new virtual machines. You're not going to be able to develop new systems much faster, right? So, essentially, hyper automation enhances the organization ability to deliver faster in a more secure and compliant way, integrating sparsely connected systems and orchestrating their process in a uniform manner, right? And actually, at the end of the presentation, I'll actually go through some of the automation initiative that an organization can actually embark, right, as part of their first step towards an automation journey, right? But before that, let's really talk about what is IT automation, right? And in fact, IT automation, to some of my colleagues, to some of my customers, is a very big word, right? Automation itself covers a broad range of technology, right? So some people tells me, is automation, is it BPMS? Is it a business process management system? Is it a RPA, right, robotic process automation, or is it just IT automation, right? RPA, essentially focus on the front end systems, right? It helps to reduce interactivity, right, required from the front end system. It's helping you to fill up, those front end UIs, speeding up, time for data processing. But however, IT automation to us, it really means infrastructure automation. That is in fact using an automation tool that automates most of your repetitive tasks, right? Really reducing your human errors that we do from an IT operation perspective, right? Because if you look at an IT ops view or point, right, the day 0, day 1, day 2 is almost the same, almost every day, right? Integrating with the multiple components, right? Integrating with the multiple point systems, and of course software, right? At the end of the day, it's really to to minimize human errors, or really to minimize human intervention, right? And that's what automation is really about. And if you look at this picture, right, the lady in the autonomous car, right, reading a magazine, right, what do you see? Right, I see the value of interconnected systems together, right? Every system, part of the car, whether is it a GPS, whether is it the brakes, the LiDAR, the image recognition, the engine, the AI systems, they are all well integrated together, right, to orchestrate an important task. And what is it? It's really essentially bring that lady, right, that's who she's reading the magazine, to her destination. And that's the outcome that we want, right? To be able to automate all of this end to end bring multiple systems together and to deliver a useful outcome, right? And if you talk about hybrid cloud journey, right, as you start to move to the hybrid cloud, right, moving away from bare metal to virtual machines to containers, and at the same time, you have to modernize your application, right, to be more cloud native, to really repackage them into a container that gives you that workload portability. But the scale of management is going to be very different, right? As you move and to the cloud, whether it's a single cloud, whether it's 2 cloud, 3 cloud, or even your private cloud, you're going to start to manage more and more instances. You're going to start to manage much more systems, right? It's so hard to manage your on-premise data center today, and you want to go to cloud, right? And before we go to the cloud, you need to be able to manage that much better today, more efficiently, when you start to begin to scale, right? You really want to use a tool, an automation tool, right, that quickly helps you to stand up and configure these environments based on your standards, this is your in-house compliance standard, or even your policies, right, even from a security benchmark policy perspective, right? And really at this cloud scale level, right, you have no choice, right, but really to automate your IT ops processes, right, because you essentially have limited human resources, right? But the ever growing of things that you need to manage will just grow and grow because of the way we consume digital resources. And if you look at one of the earlier slides, I talked about the agile organization. One of the key points that I mentioned, it's really about the community of practice, right? And this slide is all about the COP. Some people call it the community of practice. Some people call it the center of excellence, right? But if you look at how at the end of the day, it's really bringing people or teams together into a sort of best practices, right? Into how they will share their best practices or even the use cases, because automation, it's something that you can always start small, but as you start to more mature, right, and you start to gain experience and you move along the hybrid cloud journey, right? Whether is it through IAC, infrastructure as code, whether it's consuming it from self-servicing, hybrid cloud, AI ops, or to a more, like I said earlier, end-to-end kind of automation, right? This COP essentially will bring together a cross-functional team, right? If you see on the slides, you have security, you have network, you have engineering, you have operations, right? They all bring their wealth of experience, their specific domain knowledge, right? Bring them together to build, possibly new use cases for the organization, and of course, fundamentally sharing the best practices across teams, right? And because that is what you want. Choosing a tool or a technology is easy, but having it used widely in the organization, that's going to be hard, right? And that's why a COP or a COE, and that's why they are being formed, right, to really proliferate the adoption of automation within the organization. Right. So now quickly take a look at some of the automation initiatives that we can have, right? We can embark, and most of them you can typically start small. And I will talk a little bit more about the challenges of each of individual initiatives. First, immutable infrastructure, right? A lot of times people call it as IAC, right? So a lot, this kind of problems that we're all spoiled by the cloud providers. In fact, essentially it is that way, right? If you go to the cloud providers today, whether it's your AWS, Azure, or your GCP, right? Just swipe a credit card, click a few buttons or push buttons, and you can get an instance within minutes. And that's the expectations that people have today. If I go to the cloud, I can get it within minutes, but if it's on-premise, why does it take so long? Why does it take? It's not in minutes. It's not in hours. Some of my customers tells me it's in weeks. There's some of them tells me that it's going to be months. How can that be, right? If the cloud provider can do that within minutes, why on-premise within my environment it takes weeks or months to even just get me a VM? And that's really the challenge today, right? And with all the customers that I talk to, right, this is fundamentally one of the big issue, right? Because if I need to deploy a new virtual machine. I need to deploy a new virtual machine. I need to experiment on something. Now it's going to take weeks and months to get something to even start to develop, right? And after you have get that virtual machine out, you probably have to go in and configure it to your company standards, right? Or install and configure certain software on it. But humans, like any of us, we make mistakes, and in fact, humans are the weakest link, right? And that's why when we talk about automation, and that's really the benefit of automation. It's about repetitive tasks because you really want to have a standard operating environment in your organization, whether is it on-premise or whether it's on the cloud. Because then this is how an automation tool really does it very well, because it's a robot, right? It's sort of like a robot, right? To really define what you want, and it goes in and does what it does best, is to just to provision a virtual machine and configure it to your expectations. Because I've seen just so many customers, right? Today I have this engineer A, tomorrow there's this engineer B. They do different things, right? And you're gonna get a problem because of config drift. The software not working, something goes wrong, you have to figure out and troubleshoot, and that's a lot of time, kind of wasted to look at these problems. In fact, all can be solved by automation. And one of the things that we will look at really is about compliance and hardening, and that's really my next slide. Yep. So that's security and compliance automation, right? And that's key and fundamental of any organizations, right? You have a SOE, right? You have a standard operating environment, you have a standard builds, right? But how are you going to manage these systems? How are you going to harden it, depending on whether you're FSIs, whether you are healthcare, whether it's a HIPAA, PCI-DSS kind of standards, how do you make sure they're being consistent, right? But what about patches, right? It's patches are going to happen, right? It's software, they all have bugs, right? You need to be able to patch these systems in a consistent manner, right? And one of the things that I talk to my customers is that by using automation tool, they are able to patch things in a more effective manner, right? Instead of bring the whole gang down, right? Instead of bring down the network team, bring down the systems team, bring down the application team, they all can be done using automation, right? Because automation essentially perform the same task as what a human does, right? And or even much better, right? Because every time you initiate a patch of the operating system, it's going to be the same, right? Because you do it today, tomorrow, once a month for 12 months a year. It's all going to be the same, right? And in fact, all of this can be actually automated. And if you look at it from a compliance perspective, right? Integrations, right? That's all possible, right? With a VA scanner today, right? How do you integrate with a VA scanner to scan your systems and then perhaps patch it, or if it's not hardened to your specification, you really want to harden it again, right? And that's all really part of the security and compliance automation type of initiative. And in fact, it's something that a lot of our customers, or in fact, when people look at automation, this is the first thing they look at, because this is the task that they do every month, every week, and it's all very repetitive. Yeah. Next is really about network automation. And network automation is something that, from an automation perspective, it's been gaining traction for the last 2 years. And the reason is really because, in a organization, you will have a lot of networking devices, right? Depending on which industry you are in, you're going to have various mix and brands and models of your network, switches, your routers, your firewalls, your load balancer, and so forth, right? If you're in the telco industry, it's going to be different. You have your 5G, your VRANs, you're going to have your optic controller, right? So in fact, when I last talked to one of my customers, they have so many of these devices and they find it very hard to maintain, right? Because of the sheer number that can reach hundreds or even thousands, right? And one of the things that they face and is challenging for them is really about day two manageability, right? How do you manage these devices? For instance, how do you patch the firmwares in making sure that they're consistent? Because right now, depending on whether it's a Cisco, whether it's a Palo Alto, whether it's a Juniper, it's going to be a very different way of patching it. And automation really helps you to generalize it, and using a single tool, right, or a single technology, right, to really help you to do that in a very effective manner, right? Instead of going, and to every devices, right, and do that manually, and that's actually very labor intensive, right? And the other thing is really about configuration, right? How do you actually configure these devices in a consistent manner, right? How do you make sure that these devices are configured today, and maybe a few weeks later, tomorrow, they have not been drifted, right? We talk about configuration drift, and that's typical, right? Even from a config management from an infrastructure perspective, all the way to network automation, and that all are some of the common use cases that we see, and some of the initiatives that some of our customers have taken upon. Last is really about DevOps, right? DevOps, it's important, right? Saying that we talk about DevOps, we talk about CI/CD, we talk about the speed to delivery, right? How do you have a software delivery pipeline that it's able to deliver your workload much faster, whether is it in a mode 1 or mode 2 type of workload, whether it's still on traditional virtual machines, if you're on container, great, you're going to even move faster, right? And how do you really cut down the release cycle, right? In today's standard, the release cycle is not going to be twice a year, it's going to be once a week. And in fact, some of the customers that I work with, they release 3 times a day, and that's how fast they really move. And some of my customers, when we talk to them about DevOps, from a spectrum idea, right, from whiteboarding, right, they can actually do this within 3 weeks and push it out to production all within 3 weeks time frame, and that's remarkable, right? In even in today's standard, right? So thinking about it, how do you deploy your applications onto your systems in a very consistent manner, right? Because a lot of times we're still deploying it manually, and that's where automation tool can really come in to really speed up, right, and to making sure that the delivery mechanism, right, it's consistent. It's really just like a cookie cutter, right? Because today I'm going to deploy to this group of machines, right? Tomorrow I may be deploying to the cloud, right? And they all need to be consistent, right? And that's how you are able to scale much quicker, right? Because if you're going to do it manually, it's going to take a long time, and humans just makes tons and tons of mistakes, and that's not the point, right? It's really to be able to move faster, right? And that's how DevOps, together with automation, will really help to deploy your applications in a more consistent way, right? To really respond faster, right? Depending on what are your business requirements. Okay. And if you look at the overall, right, and this is from Red Hat, right? So this is some of my customers, right? And the feedback that they, or rather the benefits, or rather the they gone through the automation journey, right? And this is some of the things that they have highlighted to us, right? Because if you look at the automation initiative that I talked about earlier, the infrastructure, IAC, network automation, security and compliance, and DevOps, they're all pretty common today. And this is some of the initiatives that you can easily start on. And if you look at some of these benefits, it's pretty amazing, right? So if you look at one of my customers, which is a local government agency, right, and they are running about a couple of hundreds of virtual machines, right? A mixture of Windows and Linux, right? And they were spending a lot of time to patch it, because it's all manual SOPs, a lot of dependencies. And when they automate it at the end-to-end process, right, it's now instead of a human going in to patch it manually, it's now a push button patch, and that's just amazing, right? Because with a push button patch system that they came out with, right, the engineer just click a button to say, I want to patch a farm of servers, right, and they can go for a cup of coffee and they come back within an hour or two and look at the status of the results, right, and whether it's pass or fail, right? And that's the the savings that they achieve, right? And if you look at one of our service providers, right, they are managing, I think, about thousands of virtual machines. The savings, or rather the outcome, right, they managed to save up to 75%, and that's really fundamental of automation, right? Because server patching, a lot of IT ops, infrastructure tools, or rather the operations that you need to do, is all very repetitive, right? And in fact, health checks is interesting, right? Because this is from a healthcare agency, right? And the thing that they do is every morning, right, when they step into the office, or rather, now it's work from home, right, they remotely log into the machine, right, and that's the first thing they do in the morning is to run a series of health check scripts and get the results, copy and paste into the spreadsheet, and send it off to management, right? So a spreadsheet, there's green, there's amber, and there's red. And that's what they do in the first half of the day. And if you look at it, they're doing health checks and doing some form of remediation. And the reality is that why does a human needs to do this every day, first thing in the morning, right? All this can be in fact be actually being automated. And this is really similar to most of the use cases out there relating to IT infrastructure, right? We talk about application deployment, integrating with a CI tool, right? To really deploy your applications, right? Because the speed of delivery is going to increase, right? And you want it, to be able to deploy it in a very consistent manner, right? And same for the server compliance check, right? Server compliance check, every quarter, every half a year, you have an audit, and an audit process typically is a very painful process, right? Because you have to scramble, you have to go through every machines to really pull out the records, right? And to make sure that your server is compliant, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to submit the audit report. And in this particular customer, right, they're fully automated, right? And the accuracy was tremendous, right? Because it's all fully automated. There's no human in the loop, right? Human always make mistakes, and that's the problem here. Yeah. Okay, and this is going to be my last slide, and as a joke, right? So COVID-19 has shown what the future world can be, right? Where digital interaction is going to be more and more important, right? Where you're forcing organizations to really adopt a digital strategy earlier. We talk about the benefits of automation, right? And why is it a critical piece in managing your IT infrastructure at scale, right? With our limited human resources. We talk about automation, can automate many of your day zero, day one, day two activities, right? Really removing the mundane routines. And at the end of the day, right, minimizing human errors. And at the same time, right, the most importantly is to really allow our engineers, right, who are struggling, right, to keep the lights on, right, to really have the opportunity to learn new things, right, and to level up their skills and value add to their organizations even further. We need to, at the end of the day, the industry is changing, right? We talk about AI, we talk about ML, right? AI, ML, and of course AI ops, right? So we need to better prepare, our workforce for that, right? And I hope that the audience now has a better understanding of what automation is really about, and some of the use cases, some of the possible initiatives that you can embark that journey on, right? In fact, in today's world, right, automation is driven by open source technologies, right? And all the resources, all the community is all available online. So it's really, really easy to get started, to begin to automate, right? Okay, happy automating, right? So with that, we'll move on to the Q&A, and if you're interested in a white paper, right, from Red Hat, you can actually take a phone and scan the QR code, and it will bring you a link to the white paper. Okay. So let me just look at the, how do I do this?
Thanks, Liming. There's a couple of questions on the chat.
Okay, sure. Just maybe I should, hang on. Let me see, how do I do this?
Okay, so let me read the question out to you so that
Okay,
you
sure.
can then answer, right?
Yeah, sure.
First one is actually from Annie. Her question is about, what about RPA for many end user operations? So maybe you can talk about how when you refer to automation, how does it reflect or relate to RPA?
Yeah, so automation, right? So automation, RPA is actually it's very different from IT automation, but RPA itself is indeed a very, it plays a very unique role in terms of front end or end user operation. And one of the things that I read about, I think from one of the agencies, is that during these times, right, they're actually using RPA a lot because to really speed up the paper processing, right, or rather the front end processing. That's where you need to load in data, right? Bridging from the legacy systems to the more modernized systems, right? Because a lot of times, the way you interact with all these front-end systems, right? And that's the challenge there. And RPA, totally helps in that, because it allows you to navigate those fields much easily, right? And in fact, I think some of the RPA tools out there in the market today, they all have some form of capabilities to learn to interact with your front-end systems, right? And that's how a RPA systems will work, right? Interacting with perhaps a process automation manager, right? To really put this as a end-to-end solution. Yeah. Okay, I think the next question from Joe is, how do I get started easily on the automation journey? Actually, that's a very good question, right? Because automation journey itself, right? And when we look at all, from our perspective, right, and my customers, they all have a grand, vision, right? They all have a grand vision to say that, hey, yes, we do need automation, right? How do I, start on this? How do I reach that end state? How do I reach that end goal to say that, hey, I realize that I need automation to really support my digital transformation. I need automation to support my business transformation, because, how do I support newer initiatives without an Agile IT, without, bring up my systems at the, at the snap of my fingertip, right? But if you look at the journey itself, right, like I said earlier, we can always start small. And that's where, we look at the problem statements, right? And when you look at how the activities that you do on a day-to-day basis, right? I'm sure there are certain things that you do on a day-to-day basis that are painful. Certainly there are, right? And if you look at that and try to break it down into smaller kind of activities, and that's where most of my customers, or most of how people start automation, right? That's how they started, right? Look at some of the small use cases, some of the individual activities, and they start from there, right? As they mature, as they learn more and more, right? And that's where, I talk about the COP, right? And the community practice is really important as you start to mature, because you don't really want to be operating in silos. And, in fact, an Agile organization, you don't want to work in silos. And that's where the COP will come in, right? Because as you start to identify some of these use cases and, putting them together for an end-to-end workflow, and that's where, you start to really see things being automated, and the community of practice will come in, right? Because really sharing the best practices across multiple teams, right? Today you could have networking team doing a bit of automation, you could have the system team doing a bit of automation, but at the end of the day, right, you want to put this together, right? Because to really support your journey, right, from the hybrid cloud journey itself. Okay, I think the next question from Justin, right? It's Red Hat Ansible automation. Is it a CI/CD tool? Does it support shift left security tools for agile development? Oh, that's indeed a good question, right? So when we talk about, okay, so this is very specific to Red Hat Ansible, right? So Red Hat Ansible is an automation tool, right? It's not a CI/CD tool per se, right? It's not a Jenkins, it's not a Azure DevOps, right? So, but when we talk about DevOps, it's say DevOps integration, right? It's going to really take part of the CD delivery pipeline, sorry, the CD portion of the CI/CD pipeline, right? Because Ansible itself can really integrate with multiple tools, right? Integrate with multiple technologies, and whether you are building a new infrastructure, right? A QA dev environment as part of your CI/CD pipeline, because I want a QA environment that is immutable, right? After that, I'm going to tear it down, and that's what Ansible is really good at, right? To really to move your application across, right? Or on a container system, right? A container platform like Kubernetes is going to help you move your images across multiple containers, multiple platforms, right? Multiple Kubernetes stuff, right? And that's how Ansible play a role in the CI/CD pipeline, right? And I think the next question is really about, does it support shift left of security tools, right, for agile development, right? So when you talk about security paradigm, right, in the shift left paradigm, right, especially in a container world or in agile development, right, this is where you will take advantage of other tools, other technologies in the market today, right, to really scan your code, really do static code analysis, doing CV scanning of your container images and stuff, right? And that's where these tools will be part of your pipeline, right? That is mostly part of the CI pipeline, right? And therefore, thereafter, Ansible will take over for your CD portion. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Hey, thanks, Liming. We've come to the top of the hour. I think we just got one last question. Okay, so there was one last question. Why don't we take that?
Okay.
Can I patch my Windows and Linux servers using an automation tool?
All right. Certainly, definitely, yes. All right, and that's again, a lot of one of the common use cases is patching, right? And because patching is one of the most pain activities that we do, on a monthly basis. And in fact, a lot of customers today, they're all using an automation tool to help them to patch, because you need to realize that patching is not a single event. In fact, there is a lot of activities that's related to patching, right? You need to do a backup, perhaps you need to do a VM snapshot, for instance, and that's where a automation tool, right, that can really come in to put this flow together for you to do that patching process. Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks, Liming.
Yeah.
So he's got a QR code in there. So if you need more information, you can scan the QR code to get more information. With that, let me move to the last question. Okay. Question for Camilla. Can you turn on the button that everyone can see all the other questions? If you can. So Annie will revert to you with those as well. Camilla,